So today I'm going to take a minute to walk you guys through my journey as a child passenger researcher and try to hit on some of the impact that I believe my research is having. I don't have any relevant conflicts of interest to disclose. And when people ask me what got me started in this avenue, it really takes me back almost 7 years now when I was expecting my third and getting ready to come on to a new faculty position, having completed fellowship in pediatric emergency medicine and pediatric health services research. And the third kid posed many challenges for our family. One of the ones that I felt really strongly about was the challenge of trying to get 3 car seats into the back seat of a sedan because I had a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a newborn coming. And being resourced people, we were able to go out and buy a new car to solve that problem. But it was just this little thing that I didn't really notice at the time that I was able to do, and I know not everybody that is out in the world has that luxury. So then fast forward to the end of my maternity leave, and September, end of the month rolls around, and NPR has a story about the 3 states that were holding out on passing booster seat legislation. And a senator from South Dakota was talking about how it's really important for that to be a family's choice. And it just got under my skin for a family's choice about not restraining or putting their child in a size inappropriate restraint then results in something that I'm taking care of in the emergency department. And anybody who works clinically in the emergency department who's taking care of a family after a crash knows that nobody is like, oh, I really meant to put my kid in a seatbelt while they were falling asleep in the back seat and that caused them to now be permanently paralyzed or have an aortic injury. And so I really felt like this was an important area and went back to work and started talking with my research mentorship and got a lot of feedback that this was an important issue from a public health standpoint that needed to become the focus of my research. So if we look today, we have had some progress in terms of booster seat legislation across the country, but it still remains a bit of a checkerboard, and South Dakota remains the one holdout state that continues to allow children to come out of child passenger restraints at a child's 4th birthday. Tennessee and Wyoming are currently the most progressive states in terms of their booster seat legislation, and car seats are used there until a child turns 9. We also know that there have been dramatic improvements in the last 40 years in terms of child passenger deaths. And you can see with these trend lines, every age group has had dramatic declines. But since the booster seat legislation passage movement in the kind of 2002 to present day, we've really leveled off in terms of injury and fatality rates for child passengers. And I see this as a continued opportunity for improvement. Nationally, there is a push toward 0 deaths, and the vision for the National Highway Safety System is to be free of fatalities. This is something that's been taken up at the state level, and many states around the country are focused on this. Part of the Michigan kind of changing billboard signs for the last couple years have been tracking those deaths, and for whatever reason this year we're not currently tracking them, but we've leveled off, and with the economy turning around, it seems like we're on the upswing again in terms of traffic fatalities. So we have room to improve, and countries like Sweden have demonstrated that we really can get close to 0 deaths, particularly for the youngest patients who are properly restrained in an age-appropriate and size-appropriate restraint. So the reasons for kids needing different restraint systems at different points in life depend a lot on the size and shape of heads and musculoskeletal systems. So these are scaled models across development in terms of the relative head size, trunk size, and each of the restraint systems from a rear-facing car seat to a forward-facing car seat to a booster seat and then to a seat belt are helping to optimally protect children in a crash. And in 2002, the American Academy of Pediatrics had really clean and simple guidelines for child passenger restraint. Rear facing until 1 year and 20 pounds, forward facing until 4 years and 40 pounds, booster seat until 8 years and 80 pounds. In 2011, right at the start of my career development award, the AAP bumped things out in terms of their recommendations, and they were able to look at both crash and simulated child passenger injuries, and really found a benefit to rear facing until at least age 2, then a forward facing car seat for as long as possible, followed by a booster seat until an adult seatbelt fits properly. And we don't expect that until somebody is at a height of 57 inches tall. And as I was starting to think about those guidelines and trying to figure out how to get publications out, I was in conversations with Gary Freed, one of my research mentors, around some things that he had been hearing at national conferences, that there were lower rates of restraint use for minority populations. And so what I was able to do is obtain the National Survey of the Use of Booster Seats for multiple years from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, and perform secondary data analyses on the different restraint types that were used for different ages, and found that there were in fact those observed differences, with minority children being 2 to 3 times more likely to be completely unrestrained, and also to be using a restraint that was not appropriate for their age over time. And this is where I think that research hitting impact really overlays with the media, and we can get work out into our peer-reviewed journals, but that reaches a fairly narrow audience. And this work was picked up by the New York Times Well blog, and that led to then additional conversations about what can be done in this space. I've been able to look at these questions at a more local level in the emergency departments at Hurley and at University of Michigan, and we found a similar pattern that children in our area are also more likely to be premature transitioned when they're non-white. And this pattern holds for the 1 to 3-year-olds, as well as for our 4 to 7-year-olds. But then when we get to the 8 to 12-year-olds, we have premature transitions. All of these children are shorter than 57 inches. Anybody who's using a seatbelt would be safer if they were in a booster seat. And so this kind of circles back to those legal requirements, and Michigan doesn't require booster seat use beyond the 8th birthday at this point. So this led to an analysis that one of a public health student was able to conduct, comparing the appropriateness criteria across Michigan law, our national guidelines, and then looking at the weight and height limits for restraints. And looking at the agreement between what children are riding in and these guidelines. And what we found in our sample of families in the emergency departments at U of M and Hurley is that the Michigan law is most consistently adhered to, but then if we get out to more optimal restraint use for the typical weight and height limits for seats, we're getting as low as 9% appropriateness. And if we take that together, there's very poor agreement between the different criteria. And we've had an opportunity to talk to parents, and they point out this inconsistency and ask us to move into a direction where we're not doing it by age, but doing it by height and weight. And then once you get height and weight, they need to go to this type of car seat because it gets confusing. And you don't know what's a recommendation and what's the law. They ask for more clarity. So looking into this a little bit further, just pointing out that the weight limits for child safety seats have moved beyond those 2002 guidelines. So booster seats now take children up to 120 pounds, forward-facing car seats up to 80 pounds, and rear-facing car seats, some of them out to 45 pounds. And then just tying this back to some, again, media opportunities to connect back to our local community. My son Oliver and my husband were in a car crash when we were up north, and if Oliver had been not in his 5-point harness, I feel fairly strongly that he would have been seriously injured. And this has led to interest in the state legislature, and there's a bill that's been put forward by Representative Cox, and I'm going to be presenting next week in one of the committees around this legislation, and we're going to see if we can get some impact there. And I just want to acknowledge my mentors. Rebecca, I think, is the main one in the room here, and the research team, some of who might be in the room right now, for their support and help through all this.
We have time for a couple of questions. I think you're a great example, Michelle, of the ability to take your EM role as physician and translate it into advocacy, both in research, from research findings, as well as EM physician advocacy. And that's a voice that many of us have, and you're able to use. And you've done a lot of great work with that. We have time for one or two questions?
Michelle, do you take into consideration the cost of the car seats? I just heard a conversation yesterday when I was watching a ball game about two parents talking about how, expensive they were. They're up in the, $300 for the nice ones, and saying that, they were just going to go to Walmart and buy something cheap because they couldn't afford to have 2 or 3 in their cars. And just what programs and things are available to those that can't afford them, and how does that, data fall into the research?
Yeah, so the car seats that are all on the US market have all passed the same safety standards. So the $70 forward-facing, rear-facing convertible car seat you can buy at Walmart is no better than the one that you can get at Urban Toddler for $700 from that standpoint. And then it becomes an issue around your style and your kind of social environment around what you want to commit to a car seat. But there are programs like the Buckle Up programs, both in Mott and in the greater Flint area and throughout the state, where there are free and reduced car seat programs available.
Talking practicalities, and this may get a little off what your primary focus of research may be, but I mean, there's some pretty significant interface with the cars issues with car seats, let alone, the high you can't fit 3 car seats in the back seat issue that I think many of us have experienced. Is there work going on either from you or related groups to look at how to make car seats a little more user-friendly?
So I think the user-friendly designs is something that goes out to industry and more folks with an engineering focus, and that's not something I've been actively involved in, but I know folks at Umtree are working on that. I'm really interested in that usability piece, and going back to child passenger safety technicians with a family can be really helpful. And there are certain styles of car seats that are going to work better 3 in a row and with certain cars. So going with those resources and the experts in terms of car seat installation would be the other thing I'd recommend.
Great, and Michelle, you're in year 4 of your K Award?
Yeah.
Right, so you were talking some this morning about junior faculty who have K Awards, and I think you probably were in the early realm of pediatric emergency physicians across the country to receive a K Award, which is that NIH award from NICHD,
Yep.
And you're now working on your R1 award for junior.
Yep, thank you.